Well, hey, everybody, thanks for joining me today. This is a season in our work where people are coming back to work and they're coming back to church. But as we come out of the pandemic, we're seeing a very real need to pay attention to mental health and mental wellness, and believe that there's been a lot of stress and burnout and all kinds of problems that were already there, exacerbated by the pandemic. So I'm thrilled today to have with me my friend Heather Palacios. Heather and I met through her husband, Raul, who is arguably one of the best exec pastors on the planet. Right now, he's trying to be one of the best fishermen on the planet. But Heather, thanks for
Wow.
joining us.
I'm going to tell him you said that. I get so much mileage out of what you just said.
But you guys are at Church by the Glades in South Florida and doing an amazing job with David and Lisa Hughes. And just thank you for what you're doing in South Florida. Tell me a little bit about how church is feeling now that you guys are opening back up.
Well, we are currently running at half capacity, as in half the services that we used to pre-2020. And I mean, that's a win, because there was a time where we were having no services. So I see that as a huge win that we're now up to 1 on Saturday night, 3 on Sunday. And the last couple of weeks, we've been able to create the no mask zone in the auditorium. So we've got the no maskers on one side and we got the maskers on the other side. And right now we're enjoying the fact that we can make everybody happy.
That's awesome. I was in a church last week in Austin where they have a mask venue now. And it's only like 10% of their total attendance. It's like, if that's your thing and you really need that, we'll do. So seeing people solve this lots of different creative ways.
Yes.
I wonder, Heather, you guys have seen enormous growth there, but you're also seeing that people aren't coming back necessarily well, right? Like, tell me what you're seeing in that regard.
Yeah. Well, 2020, of course, obviously was a difficult year. It was a pandemic that affects the body in such adverse ways, to the point of, death. And I'm just so thankful that we're being able to kind of physically create a vaccine, physically create safe measures so that we can move on from that. But there is a lot of residual damage left behind mentally. Because the unspoken statistics of overdoses, domestic violence, suicide attempts, addiction rose, those don't go away with a vaccine. So we've got to take that on and not, we don't want to be remiss that, oh, yay, the pandemic has gotten better, and forsake the fact that mentally people are still trying to put themselves back together.
Well, and I know you're doing some things to try and help folks, but this isn't just Heather says, oh, let me pick a felt need or let me pick a affinity group. Like, this is your life, right? Tell people a little of your story and why this is so close to you.
Yes, actually, my story is pretty unorthodox, but it started when I was 8 years old. So we're going back to like 1981. Oh my gosh, I'm so old. But anyway, yeah, 1981, when I penned on my little stationery what would essentially be today considered a suicide letter, and mailed it to my grandparents. Because at 8 years old, I really began a lifelong journey of my weakness, my temptation being suicide. And, to date, there has been about half a dozen unfortunate attempts, and I'm still here, and I thank God for that. But I also want to be a good steward with my weakness. Paul talked about that. He asked God to take his weakness away, and God didn't. So he became a good steward with it. And I think with me having the propensity to want suicide so palpably in my mind, but still being here, I'm gonna leverage that. I'm gonna steward that as best as I can. I don't want one more person to take their life.
Wow. So let's stop right now, and let me just ask, this is not my struggle. But I don't know that anybody really knows that it is until they're so far down a hole they don't. So what would be like you've learned through these different valleys you've gone through and unfortunate times? What are the warning signs you look for when it's like, oop, time to get a little help? Like what could listeners take away saying, I better watch for that, or I'm feeling that I need to get some help? What are the yellow and then red flags?
Sure, sure. I'll talk about it from a personal standpoint because that looking for the signs in somebody else that's different, a little bit different. But for myself, I mean, I know I don't have to look any further back than 2020 when it was mandated by the government to isolate for somebody that has any kind of mental affliction. That's like public enemy number one. And it almost made me like look at God and say, are you kidding? I mean, this is the one thing that Elijah and Jonah and Job, when they started to have these thoughts of wanting to give up, they were isolated. And here I am now, somebody that has battled the thought and acted on it with suicide almost my whole life, and I have to be isolated. So I was like, I have got to have a first aid kit for myself to make it through this year, or I'm not going to make it. And so I went to the scriptures and I just went to my, experiences of battling this in the past. And it became a formula of, I need Christian counseling. I need support. I need medication. And I need church. And those were non-negotiables for 2020. Now, church, of course, was online, but when you're in a mental affliction, just the church, an hour of something good can do great things when your mind is trekking in the direction of bad.
Wow. So when somebody starts to feel, if you feel A, B, C, D, hey, back off, this is real, what would that list look like from what you've learned?
I think if you start to feel in your mind ongoing negativity, whether it is angst or sadness or depression or the revisiting of trauma, anything in your mind that starts to show itself to be a pattern of bad, you need to make it beeline. Do not even stop at $200 and collect them and go. A beeline for Christian counseling. Number one. That is like, that I tell that to everybody, whether it's a secular audience or a religious audience, you've got to seek Christian therapy. And the reason I emphasize that so much is because of the Bible. The Bible says that he is a wonderful counselor. Mm. And so what is a Christian counselor? It is a mouthpiece for the wonderful counselor who created me and my brain, by the way. So I need the Holy Spirit of God who created me to be a voice in the room with a counselor. I love psychology. I love theorems and hypotheses and suggestions. Those are all great. But that person needs to speak on behalf of the one who created me. Mm. Yeah.
How do you make sure you're finding a good counselor? Because like that was always the trick when I was pastoring and we would refer people out. It was like, if I found 5 good counselors I could refer to, I was like, yes, because it's all over the place, whether somebody's legit or not.
I would answer that in 2 ways. First of all, I would say that God has had mercy on, I am one of those type of people that prays like a nagging wife. I am like a faucet that you cannot fix the talkage on. I will, or caulkage or talk, whatever, whatever that word's called. I think I could just see God being like, oh my gosh, all right already. And one of those prayers has been, Lord, I know that the harvest of mentally afflicted people is plenty and the workers to help them are few. Please send more workers. And honestly, God has allowed me to amass quite a significant network nationwide to help people get Christian counseling. And the other thing I would say though is, as a patient, we have the tendency to kind of get, think that, oh, that guy was a wackadoodle-doo. I ain't going back to him. I'm not going back to her. Listen, counselors are weird. Deal with it. That's the way it goes. They're all weird. They're all weird. So, you just have to know that if it's a Christian counselor, put up with the quirks, put up with the Dockers with the braided belt and the Tommy Hilfiger polo, and just understand that you're not partying with these people. They're a mouthpiece for God to speak to you, to help your brain. So I do think we throw in the towel from the patient side a little too quickly on them.
Or when they say things we don't like to hear.
Yes. Listen, the truth hurts, but it also sets you free.
That's good. Have you got a website people can go to see that network of Christian counselors, or where would they go if they wanted to learn more directly from you?
Yes, I am wonderful.com and all the social media platforms at Wonderful, and it is spelled with an H in the word wonderful, so it's, get it? Do you see what I did there? Please tell me you see what I did there.
It's not a separate H.
I took the word wonderful and I stuck an H in there because my name starts with Heather and I'm a female, so it's wonderful.
That's awesome. So why are we here today? Isn't that what every counselor says during the first session? So why are we on the podcast today? I follow you and Raul on social, and we're connected through a lot of different things. We've actually done work for you guys before. But I learned that you're actually doing something now. You're sending out kits, right?
Yes.
Tell me the big idea. Tell me what you're doing and what's God doing with it.
So I recognized several years ago that I have 3 essentials that are tangible. Church, a journal, church, and a Bible. Those are the 3 essentials that are tangible. And when I was making visits to psychiatric wards or to ICUs from people who attempted suicide that were on life support, I never show up empty-handed. I recognized I have walked this plight. I know what this is like. And at the very minimum, when I go and make these visits, I will bring the 3 essentials and I will pray for them. And that kind of started to evolve in a more social media way during 2020, when the call to people that were attempting suicide and overdosing was weekly. I mean, in 1 week I had over 20. Wow. So I was like, I can't get to them though because of the COVID. So I was like, well, I'll just put all the essentials in a box and I'll just start shipping these. Well, that started in November, and now we're in May, and I've shipped over 600 wonderful life boxes around the world. Actually, I just recently got an inquiry from a pastor in South Africa who's suicidal, and we shipped him a life box.
And in the box is
the Bible and a Church by the Glades invite card, because if they don't have a church, they can watch ours online. I would never want to take somebody from their church, but I never make the assumption that they have one. So they get a Bible, they get a journal, they get an invitation to our church on a card. And then, because I don't ever want it to feel like a bait and switch, because I would say half of these have gone to people of no faith. I throw in fun things. I throw in things that would make them smile. I throw in things that would make the box feel like it's just a box of life. So we put in wristbands, we put in stress balls, we put in puzzles, we put in for kids. I've sent a life box recently to a 6-year-old, which is just heartbreaking that a 6-year-old's dancing with the devil of death in his mind. But yeah, we put all kinds of tchotchkes in there so that it's not just a box of 3 essentials.
Wow. And what are you hearing? Like, what's the result?
Well, a lot of times these requests come from concerned loved ones. And I'm not looking for them to circle back around to me. I just don't want them to die. But there's been a few cases where they have found me. And the one that stands out in my mind, she is a Jewish lesbian, and fell back into addiction during 2020 and had lost a ton of weight, did not look good, reached out to me, said, I just need help, sent her a life box, and she sent me a video of her opening it. Um, it, it wrecked me.
Wow.
She was crying so hard because somebody cared.
Wow. Wow. I want to pick your brain on concerned loved ones, right? So the mental health question's been quiet for too long. It's been a stigma for too long, but I do think it has gained some attention recently that's causing everybody to pay more attention. And I remember in the early days of Google, if my hamstring hurt, I would Google around and figure out this is terminal for sure because my hamstring hurt. So like, there's such there's such a, they call it med school disease when you start reading everything you can. You diagnose yourself with every condition you read about.
Yes.
So what can family members or loved ones look for? It's like, no, that is a warning sign. It's not just junk. And then I'll flip the question and just say, what are okay, I got a loved one. I'm kind of wondering, Heather says this is something worth paying attention to. What would be a few warning signs that you would point out?
Right. Well, great question. I'll actually speak from Raul's vantage point, because it's one thing to be crazy like I am, but it's another to be married to it. I mean, try living with this for 21 years. Oh my gosh. But I have to always make sure that I say in any opportunity where I get the chance to speak. And I so appreciate you letting me. It means a lot to me that you would let me talk to you today. I'm not the hero of my story. Humanly speaking, Raul is. But I did not dive into the details of the attempts that I have had over the years, but there was one where he found me in the middle of taking my life, and Raul has not given up on me. And so for 21 years I've been able to go to him and say, gosh, what would you say to people like you? A few things I would say. Just one overarching thing that Raul would say is, it's God's job to save me, and it's Raul's job to love me. Raul cannot lay down his life wondering if he's going to come home and find me dead. He has got to be a husband, a father, a pastor, a son, a friend. And so he's been able to kind of just delineate it that way. I'll pray that God will save her, and I will honor my biblical commitment to love her. And I think that's an awesome boundary to have with anybody that has somebody that is mentally afflicted that they love. Practically speaking, Raul would say, get Christian counseling yourself. Raul walked down the aisle and he was like, all right, yeah. And then like a year later, I went crazy and was locked up in a psychiatric ward. He didn't know that. He didn't go to school for that. He doesn't have a degree in that. So he went and sought counseling himself. How do I love this person? How do I live with this person? So, and then the other thing I would say is he's just needed support. He's needed support. And so he has sought that out with a couple of godly guys at church, Pastor David being one of them, and then, another one that he's had as a friend that goes to our church for a long time.
Wow. Super helpful. And, if you're struggling, I would rather you ask for help and be wrong and not be struggling. Mental health is not a hamstring.
Right.
It's not a little injury. And you can call it mental health, you can call it demoniac, you can call it any number of things, but it's real, and it's not what we were made to be. What would you say to anybody today as we kind of close out time? Anybody who's struggling right now, can you just give a word of encouragement or
Yeah. What I would say to anybody, and it can be anybody. It could be an athlete. It could be a celebrity. It could be a poor person, a rich person, a male, a female, anybody in the world can can get to the point where they want to give up. And what I would say to that person is, number one, you need to call somebody right now. You need to get off this podcast and you need to call somebody. Number two, I would say to you, from my heart to yours, that thankfully are both still beating, is you're the only one of you. If you take yourself out of the puzzle of humanity, you will leave a hole in that puzzle that no other piece can fill.
Mm.
You are the only one of you, and God is well aware of what you're going through. And because he needs you here, because you're the only one, you can get through what you're going through.
Wow. That sounds like real-time experience.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh, Heather, your vulnerability is amazing, and the way you're, facing this struggle, which does not just go away.
Right.
Um, you know, props to you, more power to you, prayers for you. If people want to get a life box, no, I said it wrong. If they want to get a box,
Lifebox, you said it right.
life box, just go to One Herful, and you can find everything there, right?
Correct.
That's great. Well, prayers and blessings to you and Raul, and to any of you out there that are struggling as well.
Yes.
Get help and call. And wow, Heather, thanks for being such a blessing today.
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity.